Welcome into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. I do have a problem with Jordan Lyles, but it might not involve his performance. I love that there's no quit in this young team. And lastly, why I think this particular thing matters. That's all coming up next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, I want to thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen every day. And even though it's been a weird day, this being the second episode of the day, to make up for not having a podcast episode on Monday due to some technical difficulties, I really do appreciate you sticking with me and for all the downloads that you guys have had on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, and the extra subscribers we've gotten on YouTube. So you be the next person. Just go to YouTube, the Locked On Royals podcast page, and hit that big red button, the subscribe button, and continue to add to that following account. So there is a big reason why I'm trying to hustle in and get this podcast out there, because what a wild night it was at Kauffman Stadium. I mean, it goes from, this might be a pitcher's duel to the first three innings. Then it goes from, my goodness, what a blowout, to, well, this is interesting again, to maybe not so interesting anymore, to, oh, it is very interesting again, to, unfortunately, a disappointing end, to what was a very impressive comeback by the Royals. And we'll get into that and the fight this young team showed. But I think I'd be doing everybody a disservice if I did not talk about Jordan Lyles in this opening segment. I tweeted this out, and you can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. I tweeted this out during the Philly series. And the Philly series was a fun one for me. I love seeing this team, regardless of record, play in sold-out environments. I love the San Diego series when they took 2 of 3. I love the series against Boston at Fenway Park. I love the series at Yankee Stadium, despite the outcome of that series. I like it when they play in front of big crowds. And Jordan Lyles was the starter in one of those games. And he had a very Jordan Lyles-ish start. Was not pretty at all. He got through 5 innings, I believe it was, gave up 5 runs. Okay, so be it. We're not shocked at this point that Jordan Lyles is not a very good pitcher. And I tweeted out, I can't get mad at Jordan Lyles for being Jordan Lyles, and Jordan Lyles is very Jordan Lyles tonight. I think it was a very similar thing in tonight's game. He gives up 7 runs in the 4th inning, 4 of them coming by way of the long ball. Back-to-back home runs to open up the inning, and these were not wall scrapers. I know Teoscar Hernandez had the Pepsi party porch, or what do they call it? The party porch, party deck, whatever you want to call it, in right center field. Like, you could theoretically say it just cleared the wall. That's still a long, long shot to right center field. But 4 home runs in the inning, and the boos are raining down at Kauffman Stadium, as they should. I'm sorry. We're all big boys and big girls here. You don't do your job, you're making a lot of money. The players will tell you, I'd boo me. I'd boo myself. But here's where I'm at with it. I'm no longer mad or upset when Jordan Lyles doesn't play well. Okay, Jordan Lyles is not good. All right, and he was given a contract in the offseason that was worth a lot of money. Okay, whether he thought he was deserving of the money or he was not deserving of the money, he took the money, as any human being would. 2 years, what was it, 17, 18 million? He's making somewhere between 7 to 8.5 million a year. Who wouldn't take that? For a guy who's been pretty mediocre his entire career, why would you not take that? So I don't get mad at Jordan Lyles for taking a contract like that. My issue, the crux of this problem is not with Jordan Lyles. The numbers, they're terrible. They're awful. We've known that since May, since very early on in May. They've been terrible. My issue is not that. My issue is not the 6.35 ERA. It's not leading the league in home runs given up. It's seriously none of that. My issue is, this is a Royals problem here. There was somebody in the scouting department, in the front office, that signed off on a move like this. No, that's the problem here. The problem is Somebody not only said Jordan Lyles was worth a deal, he was worth 2 years in a deal. And don't give me they saw him as an innings eater. He had about 180 innings for Baltimore last year. Look, if you go over the history of Jordan Lyles, he had not been very good. That's not an innings eater. That's a guy who will get shelled. And yes, he's kind of a rubber arm that he can just go out there and give you 5 innings, 6 innings. But if he gives up 6 or 7 or 8, that's not what you want out of an innings eater. And at this point, there's no need to cut him. There's nobody else pounding at the door to make starts in front of Jordan Lyles. That's where I'm at with this. But this can't happen again in the offseason. I don't think I've ever seen a move, and that's crazy to say this. I don't think I've ever seen a move where when the Royals gave him the money, I went, what are they doing? How do you give Jordan Lyles that money? Then the season happens, and all the pessimistic people, all the disappointment from that deal, it was completely on display. Jordan Lyles has never had a good month in Kansas City. He's had marginal numbers, better than where they were, but he's been bad, very bad. I had somebody tweet at me tonight that it makes him miss Kyle Davies, and we all remember the Kyle Davies era in Kansas City. Jordan Lyles is just not entertaining to watch. He's not fun to watch, but again, my problem's not with him. He, by all accounts, was a very good guy. He's going out there every 5th day. He's not trying to give up runs. He's just not good. And I don't get mad at guys who just aren't good. I get mad at people that put those bad players in spots to fail. Okay, Jordan Lyles going out every 5th day at this point, yeah, it's setting him up to fail because he's not very good. But this is a problem that goes all the way back to the offseason. All the way back to the offseason. And it's something that I think is a reoccurring issue. And if it happens again in the offseason, I have serious doubts about what this front office can do. I mean, a signing like this, if it's a 1 year, a minor league deal, remember the Homer Bailey deal that the Royals had back in, I think that was 2019? Minor league deal. Okay, Homer Bailey was much better than this, but at the time, everybody's going, why are you giving Homer Bailey innings? Well, they tried to get trade value. Somebody in that front office, in the scouting department, again, I can't wrap my mind around it, looked at Jordan Lyles and said he's worth 2 years. It's the most expensive contract the Royals gave to any free agent this past offseason. And he's looked like one of the worst pitchers the Royals have ever employed. And yes, the numbers aren't as bad, as crazy as that sounds. His 6.3 plus ERA, it's also met with about league average whip, maybe slightly above average. You know, he's not like a Lance Lynn who's right up there in home runs given up, but all the swing and miss is great. Now, Jordan Lyles, by every single metric, except for a couple, it's been really bad. But again, this is a front office problem. This is a scouting problem. When you're trying to get free agents, you can't throw money like that at players like this. Okay, if Jordan Lyles had 200 innings, that's the thing with like the Mike Minor deal back in 2021. You know, Mike Minor wasn't great in the COVID year, but in the 2019 season, I believe it was, he had 200 innings, 200 strikeouts. Like, that's a guy who had Kansas City ties as well, pitched for them out of the bullpen. That's worth giving a contract to. You know, a lefty that can, find the strike zone. He had been an innings eater before. That's a move that makes sense. This one never did. Never did from the start. And now we're in the middle of August, and he's got a 6.3 plus ERA. That's bad, man. That's really, really bad. And I just can't get mad at Jordan Lyles for all of that. Like, it's easy, of course, to point the finger and say, the dude's terrible. Let's just all hate on him. Well, listen, again, he deserves blame for not being very good. But I have always been the person who blames people who put players in situations where they'll fail. You know, if you have a struggling bullpen arm, okay, and you put him out there to close out a game and he fails, I don't blame the pitcher. I blame the manager. You put a struggling hitter in the cleanup spot and he goes 0 for 4 with 4 Ks, I don't blame the player. I blame the manager in that spot. But in this particular case, I mean, Matt Quatraro has to throw somebody out there, and there's nobody else that makes a lot of sense. Maybe Anthony Veneziano, maybe Max Castillo, maybe Jonathan Bolin. Take your pick. I know they'd all be much more fun to watch than Jordan Lyles. But this stems back to the offseason. This problem is with the front office. And I have given the front office a lot of praise. But on this, I'm not getting behind it. And no, I'm not going out on a limb on that. I don't think anybody is behind the move. I mean, I just think that whoever was the person to sign off on that, you got to question them a little bit harder next time around. Because this is going down as one of the most head-scratching moves I have seen in Royals free agent acquisitions. It didn't make sense back then. It didn't make sense to start the year. And it sure as hell doesn't make any sense now. Okay, the negativity's out of the way. The Royals did lose 10-8 to the Seattle Mariners in extra innings. But once again, this young team has shown the resiliency. And if the Royals are going to lose, and I hate playing the moral victory card, if they're going to lose, I'd like it to be just like this. I'll tell you why coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And before we dive into this young team and why I was so impressed tonight, let's give a shout out to one of today's title sponsors and one of the title sponsors of this episode in Ibotta. Now, Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items from produce to personal care to pantry goods. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. Or you could use your cash back to buy that flight that you've been eyeing, that game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner that you've been craving. So here's what you need to do. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners right here on Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network $5, just $5 for just trying Ibotta by using code MLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code MLB. That's Ibotta in the Google Play or App Store and use code MLB. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, and as I'm sure for a lot of you watching on Bally Sports, which once again, I know we all have our qualms with Bally Sports. My goodness, the camera work that continues to happen, or the lack thereof, it continues to happen. It makes it nearly unwatchable at times. But the Royals played this game exactly how I expect a young, scrappy team to play. And the reason I can live with it, I can live with losses like this. I really can. It stings to lose in extras. It always does. And don't get me wrong, whether it's 39-82 or 82-39, they sting the same. You're out there at Kauffman Stadium, you get your hopes up only to be let down. But as you've heard me say this before, when you're this late in the season and this is your record, wins and losses do not matter in the grand scheme of things. The Royals won 7 in a row. It is not going to mean a lick. It isn't going to mean a thing when spring training rolls around. None of that will matter. A hot September will not matter. But what is important individually is for the young guys to gain confidence at the big league level. Because right now, this offense is contagious, and it starts with Bobby Witt Jr., who once again stole the show. Right? Jordan Lyles has that dismal 4th inning, 7 runs, 4 bombs, Kauffman's booing. And you just think, okay, well, there's something else on, okay? You know, me personally, I love the Winning Time show on Max, I believe it is. The Lakers dynasty, following the rise of the Lakers dynasty. Great show. And, you know, me personally, I'm going, okay, well, I'll maybe tune in from time to time, but it's 7-0, and Jordan Lyles is probably going to be the innings eater for the next 2 innings. It's going to get uglier than this. But quickly, and so quickly, these young guys just feed off each other. Maikel Garcia, who extended his hitting streak once again, just knows how to hit it with 2 strikes. You know, he's a guy that is growing right before our eyes. He's maturing right before our eyes. RBI single with 2 outs. Just guided it through the left side. And here comes the Thunder in your lineup, and Bobby Witt Jr., who hits a grand slam, crushes it into the fountains. And you just, The best part is you knew it was coming. You knew something like this was coming. And that's the best part about this all with Bobby Witt Jr.'s surge is you can expect these things to happen now. It's not hoping and praying. It's not looking at Bobby Witt Jr. the same way we did with Adalberto Mondesi. That when he did something incredible, it was, okay, there's your future star. But I never expected him to do what I expect Bobby Witt Jr. to do now. When he comes up with big spots like that, I just assume he's driving in the runs, whether it's going over the wall, in the gap, or he's legging out a ground ball. So it immediately shrinks the lead to 7-5. And then here comes the bullpen once again. And Max Castillo did fine, but he gives up a 2-out RBI double to Teoscar Hernandez. And that to me, I'm thinking, okay, well, the offense is probably going, okay, well, we got to score 9 to 10 runs to even make this competitive. So we got to claw our way back. And what I loved is that there were multiple chances in the 6th, 7th, and 8th inning where the Royals could have tied that game or taken the lead. First and second, 1 out, and you have a double play ball in the 6th or 7th inning. One time you have first and second, 1 out. MJ Melendez pops up, 3 pitches. That was in the 8th inning. Freddie Fermin, who didn't have the best game, he grounds out, and you go, okay, 8-5. 8-5, just try to find a way to make it interesting in the 9th. And here's how it happens. And this is what made the 13, 14, and 15 Royals so great is you just couldn't give them extra outs. You couldn't. And do not twist my words and say that this team is like those teams. They're not. But it's the culture. It's the contagious effort surrounding these young players. They feed off each other. It goes from player to player to player, and even guys that are just here, just got here. I mean, that top of the 9th inning, here comes Nelson Velasquez, who we talked about a little bit in the podcast episode earlier today. He hits a little dribbler out to second base. He could have dogged it. He could have just slowly jogged to first. Oh, I'm out. He's running hard. And what happens? Seattle makes an error. Drew Waters pops up. What does Samad Taylor do, who would be, by all accounts, completely overmatched against Andres Munoz, throwing 98-99 on the black, too. I mean, these are nearly unhittable pitches. He spits on a 3-2 pitch at 98 miles an hour just outside the zone. That's having the confidence. Okay, so first and second. What happens after you have somebody like Michael Garcia ground into a force out? Here comes Bobby Witt Jr., tying run at the plate. What do I expect? I'll be lying if I told you I wasn't expecting anything less than a home run. And that's where my mind was at. But he did something to me even more impressive. He works the count. Again, it's a 3-1, 98-mile-an-hour pitch on the black. And in my mind, I'm going, okay, he's swinging at anything here. The old Bobby Witt Jr., he's swinging at anything because he knows I got to tie the game here. Michael Massey's behind me. He's been hot of late, but I'm the guy. I'm the star. And yes, Munoz missed by a lot. But a lot of hitters in that moment, they're so anxious, so eager to swing that they're just in swing mode. And great pitchers and ones that weren't at 40 pitches, they're going to take advantage of that. They'll throw that slider down in the way. And that guy will flail right over the top of it. Or you give Bobby Witt Jr. the high fastball back in April and May, he's not touching it. But it comes boring in on him and it nearly hits him, but he walks. Here comes Michael Massey. I think Michael Massey back in April and May would have the pressure of, I got to hit this out. I got to walk this off here. Or maybe I'm just hoping he gives me a cookie, or I'm hoping that he misses with all 4 pitches. He gets down 2 strikes. He's fouling off 97, 98, 99. And then a mistake happens, and he rips it into center field. 8-7. It's the next man up, personality to have. He's not trying to win it. Just get it to the next guy. Sound familiar? Keep the line moving. Like I said, don't twist my words. Make it seem like the 15 Royals are just the same as these guys who have 82 losses in August. To me, it's just the culture. It's the confidence. Here comes Salvador Perez. He was on those winning teams, the 13, 14, and 15 teams. And here he is in this spot. And you know what Salvi usually tries to do in that moment? Hit it 575 feet. And in those first couple pitches, that's what he was trying to do, despite just needing a bloop single. Just get the ball into the outfield. Have the ball hit the grass, hit the green in the outfield. This game's tied. And he's swinging and swinging. And here's what I was impressed with Salvi. He spits on an 89-mile-an-hour slider well out of the zone. But we've seen Salvi swing at that pitch 100 times, 200, 300, probably even 400 times. And then he gets that fastball that he just pokes into left field, ties the game, down 7-0, tied up 8-8. Now, Dairon Blanco committed an unforgettable toot plan at third base that almost cost the Royals the game. I mean, if Bobby Witt Jr. wasn't the one running and Dairon Blanco was thrown out at third base and didn't even slide, and Bobby Witt Jr. is not the one running, the Royals lose that game because he's tagged out before that run touches the plate. Those are moments, too, for rookies. It's just mental errors. And that, to me, was where all of this great that had happened, the resiliency, the young guys performing, it's erased because young teams still make dumb errors. They still make those mental mistakes. And Dairon Blanco, despite being 30, it's inexcusable because you know what he is? He's that late inning pinch running guy. He's the guy that has to come in and be an ace on the base path. But made Dyson so great, Gore so great. You're never making errors like that. You're never making mental mistakes. He did. And what happened? Well, instead of the Royals getting a chance to walk it off with MJ Melendez, who had 3 hits on the night, you have to go to Tucker Davidson out of the bullpen, who did, I think, a good enough job. The run with the ghost run second, I don't get behind. I don't like it at all. I think it's a severe advantage for the visiting team, and the Royals have benefited from that before. I don't like it for baseball. I don't think you need to speed up the game that much. Love the pitch clock. Do not love the ghost runner at second. So 2-run single by Ty France. And no, Tucker Davidson is not going to be a fit for the Royals in 2024. Even if he got out of that inning, I would have felt good. The Royals probably walk it off and we're having a much happier episode. But again, I don't think he's a fit. Good or bad, in that outing, he's not going to be a fit. And this is what I tweeted out, and I stand by it. And again, you can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. I said this is the way I would prefer the Royals to lose if they're going to lose. If they would have showed their bellies, just rolled over after back-to-back home runs, 2-0, and lost 5-0, that's not competitive. We saw a lot of losses like that from the Royals this year. A lot of them. Instead, they battle back and they lose. But Bobby Witt Jr. has a grand slam. MJ and Massey have 3 hits apiece. Massey had 2 RBIs. Michael Garcia extends his hitting streak, had a multi-hit game. You have all of that going on. It's an exciting game. And how did they lose? Their starter, who's their worst starter and one of the worst starters in baseball, gave up 7 runs. Okay, Jordan Lyles isn't fit for the future. And a waiver flyer guy gives up 2 runs in the 10th. Why should I be upset? They were competitive. The guys that I wanted to see performed, and you lost game number 82. If they would have won game number 40, yeah, I'm feeling better. Does that mean anything for 2023? No, it doesn't. I'm glad that this team still shows resiliency. It shows this clubhouse is very tight, and they still have that fire and passion, which is always nice to see in a season like this. We're not finished just yet on this second episode of the day. The last thing I want to wrap up this night with is telling you why this specific thing matters. That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Johnson. You can always follow me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Before we wrap up this episode of Locked On Royals, let's give a shout out to one of today's other sponsors in FanDuel. Now, football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. That feels like a pretty good trade-off. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. Now, you can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So here's what you need to do after this podcast. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. I feel like in a night like this, a very busy night for me, and why I wanted to do 2 episodes in one night is because, one, this is really fun to do. As crazy as this sounds, as bad as the season has been, I've had a lot of fun doing this podcast. I've had a lot of fun interacting with you, the fans. You make this enjoyable. And I can only imagine when this team is competitive and in the hunt for October baseball, the amount of fun I'm going to have. I may have to do 3 shows in a single day. But why I love watching this team from the start and why I followed them all season long and why till the end of September, I'm going to watch every single game, enjoy the highs, go through the lows. Why I do it is because I think you can see a player grow. And when you see a player have confidence, when you see a player like Bobby Witt Jr. start to know how good he is, that's something special. That makes baseball in a season like this worthwhile. And I think this little tidbit, and this segment's going to be centered around Bobby Witt Jr., but there's other guys I'm going to bring up in this conversation. When Bobby Witt Jr. hit the grand slam tonight, it was a second grand slam he's had in the last 2 months. The first one, of course, coming out of Johan Duran on a 102-mile-an-hour fastball. It's a crazy night at Kauffman Stadium. It was a great night. Tonight, different story. George Kirby, 91-mile-an-hour ball, bordering the bottom part of the zone. He crushes it, though. Both times, though, you see the bat flip. And bat flips, to me, are never in bad taste. I think bat flips are what make the game great. It gives a player personality. And I think Bobby Witt Jr. is a guy that in these first 2 years, you've seen a very humble guy, a very quiet guy. He says the right things to the media, but he's not giving you much flair. And I think the minute a player gets flair, it shows how confident they really are. And now you're seeing the bat flips. Now you're seeing the cool slides. And he knows how good he is, how good he's going to be. And that really resonates with a lot of guys out there. When you're playing behind a superstar, it's not always like the case in Anaheim where you have Trout and Ohtani and you're under 500. Sometimes you can roll like that, but for young guys that have all played together, you look to that star and you go, I want to feed off that. And seasons like this, I have people tweeting me all the time and go, this doesn't matter. Okay, this doesn't matter. They've done this before. They've had hot stretches. What's different here is if the Royals finish the season playing like they are now, maybe 3 to 4 games under 500, they're not going to have a very pretty record. But the more games they have like tonight, the more games Bobby Witt Jr. has those crazy performances, the 4-hit performances inside the Parkers. Michael Garcia will have a 20-plus game hitting streak. MJ's finding a swagger back. Michael Massey, he is somebody that is, ripping 2-run singles with 2 strikes down to his final strike, down to his final out, and he's pounding his chest. You're seeing guys come out with their personalities. And that's so important for a team that has had such a miserable season. Individual stuff matters here. Team stuff, the wins and losses, I'm not really counting those up. But when you see the players bat flipping, you see them pounding their chest and pointing the dugout, having celebrations, all of that matters. That matters going into 2024 because it brings the group closer together. They're still having fun. If you have the animosity in the clubhouse, look at Chicago right now with Pedro Grifol. Kenyon Middleton, that the big story that broke that he leaves Chicago and immediately exposes that there's no rules in the clubhouse. I'd much rather have the season the Royals are having right now than what Chicago has. And Chicago's got a superstar in Luis Robert. But Chicago's also in this tough spot where you have maybe too many egos. I don't know anybody over there personally in Chicago, but when you have guys immediately leaving and just breaking stories like that, the story about Yasmani Grandal and Tim Anderson, those feuds, maybe the Royals are too young to have feuds like that. There's not enough money involved. I don't really know. But it is important to have the confidence, have the flair, and have that carryover. Back in 18 and 19, when these guys went on those stretches, they were doing so on the backs of Whit Merrifield, on Salvador Perez, on Brad Keller. None of those guys at that point were superstars in baseball. Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be a superstar. He's showing he's a superstar. Then you've got a pretty good supporting cast slowly coming together. Garcia, Massey, Pasquantino's coming back. You listen to the podcast today, we talked about that infield. Brady Singer's looking pretty good. You could flip him, and then Cole Reagans is right behind him. These games are still important for the individuals on this team. W's and L's don't really matter to me anymore. But these individual performances, they very much do so. Okay, that is going to do it for our second episode of the day on Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for tuning in, downloading these episodes, and always interacting with me, whether it be through Twitter at JohnnyJ_15, that's at JOHNYJ_15, or on YouTube, or just reaching out to me any way you can. I always appreciate it, and I always have a great time interacting with you, the fan, and the listener, for that matter. Maybe you don't watch team anymore and you just listen. Hey, I appreciate that too. But we will be back on our normal schedule tomorrow. We'll have our episode tomorrow coming out early morning into the mid-afternoon part of the day. Thursday, we're going to have another episode, usually around the normal time. And then I will not be having a podcast episode on Friday. I will be out of town, but I'll still be answering all your questions via the mailbag. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.